We often underestimate the power of a single hour. We look at 24 hours and think, what difference could just one make? But the truth is, it's not about the size of the time, it's about the reason behind it. Why you choose to dedicate 1 hour can be the very thing that shapes your entire day, and eventually your entire life. When you wake up each morning, the world already has demands waiting for you. Emails, deadlines, responsibilities. If you dive straight into them, you're letting the world dictate your priorities. But if you take just 1 hour and make it yours, you reclaim control. You're no longer reacting, you're leading. That hour becomes a declaration. This is who I am, and this is what matters to me. Why does this matter? Because without intention, days blur into weeks, weeks into months, and suddenly years have passed without progress on the things that truly matter. That 1 hour is not about filling time, it's about aligning your time with your values. It's a reminder that life is not measured only by what you do for others, but also by what you build within yourself. Think about the people you admire most. Their success didn't come from random bursts of inspiration, it came from consistently returning to their why. They carved out time, often just an hour a day, to learn, to train, to create. They didn't wait for the world to give them permission. They started because their why was too important to ignore. 1 hour might feel small, but small things compound. Imagine reading for 1 hour a day. In a year, that's 365 hours. That's the equivalent of dozens of books, new skills, and fresh perspectives shaping your mind. The why isn't about the book itself. It's about who you become when you commit to growth or take health. 1 hour of movement a day might not change you overnight, but it redefines your identity over time. You're not just someone who wants to be fit. You're someone who shows up for yourself daily. That hour builds strength, but more importantly, it builds self-trust. The real reason 1 hour matters isn't because of what you do during it, but because of what it says about you. It says you believe your growth is worth protecting. It says you value becoming more than staying the same. It says you're willing to take ownership of your story rather than letting circumstances write it for you. When you know your why, the hour stops feeling like a sacrifice. It becomes a sanctuary. It's no longer about squeezing something extra into your day. It's about honoring the very reason you want your life to be different in the first place. We like to think that change comes from massive actions. Quitting the job, moving to a new city, starting a business overnight. But the truth is, real transformation rarely happens in giant leaps. It's the small, quiet, almost invisible choices we make consistently that create the biggest shifts over time. 1 hour a day might not seem like much. It doesn't look dramatic. You don't see results instantly, and maybe that's why people dismiss it. But the power of small choices is in their ability to compound. Just like a drop of water doesn't shape a rock in one moment, it does so through persistence, one drop after another. Think about learning a new skill. Practicing for 10 minutes might feel pointless, but 10 minutes, repeated daily, becomes an hour each week. An hour each week becomes 52 hours a year. That's more than enough to become noticeably better at something you once knew nothing about. The shift doesn't happen because of one long session. It happens because of the accumulation of many small ones. The same is true with habits that don't serve us. Missing one workout doesn't make us unhealthy, just like eating one unhealthy meal doesn't change our body overnight. But repeated often enough, these small choices accumulate in the opposite direction. They slowly shape us into someone we never intended to become without us even realizing it. What makes small choices powerful is their accessibility. Anyone can make them. You don't need wealth, special talent, or luck. You just need intention. Choosing to read instead of scroll, choosing to move instead of sit, choosing to create instead of consume. These are decisions available to us every single day, and over time, they shift not just what we do, but who we are. And here's the thing, small choices carry less resistance. The brain doesn't fight you as hard on spending 1 hour than it does on committing to a total life overhaul. That's why they stick. It's easier to say yes to 1 hour today than to demand perfection forever. Over time, those repeated yeses form the foundation of lasting change. Look back on your life and think about who you are today. You are not the result of a single dramatic event. You are the result of thousands of small decisions. What you focused on, what you ignored, what you pursued. Change didn't arrive in one sweeping motion, it arrived in moments you barely noticed. That's the paradox of small choices. In the moment, they feel insignificant. But strung together, they are the very things that move us from where we are to where we want to be. They don't just shift outcomes, they shift identities. They transform someday into today. When most people think about an hour, they think of it as just another unit of time, 60 minutes. A block on a calendar, something to fill, to schedule, to get through. But an hour can be so much more than that. It can be a container for intention, a space where transformation is seated. An hour isn't valuable because of its length. It's valuable because of what you choose to place inside it. Two people can both spend an hour, but the return on that time can be completely different. One might scroll through distractions, the other might invest in learning a skill. The clock ticks the same, but the outcomes couldn't be further apart. When you redefine an hour, it stops being about productivity alone. It becomes about alignment. What if an hour wasn't about getting more done, but about getting closer to who you want to be? What if it wasn't just about tasks, but about meaning? That shift in perspective turns time from something you manage into something you honor. Think of an hour as a mirror. It reflects your priorities back at you. If you say health is important, but never dedicate an hour to it, the reflection reveals a gap between words and actions. If you say family matters, but can't carve out an hour for them, the mirror tells the truth. An hour doesn't lie. It shows you where your values are actually being lived. This is why 1 hour can never be dismissed as just an hour. It carries symbolic weight. It's not simply 60 minutes. It's a declaration of what you stand for. It's you drawing a line in the sand and saying, and this time, I will not be pulled by the noise of the world. I will dedicate it to what matters. Redefining 1 hour also means freeing it from perfection. It doesn't have to look impressive. You don't need the perfect environment, the perfect plan, or the perfect mindset. You just need to show up. Because the power of that hour isn't in how polished it looks. It's in the fact that it's yours, intentionally chosen. Think about how much we waste by dismissing small windows of time. We say, it's only an hour, what difference will it make? And yet, in 1 hour you could write a page, walk 3 miles, read a few chapters, or simply sit in silence to reset your mind. 1 hour, redefined, is no longer a filler of gaps, it's a builder of futures. Once you begin to see an hour not as a fraction of a day, but as a cornerstone of growth, the way you treat it changes. It's no longer disposable. It's no longer background. It becomes sacred. It becomes the moment you protect, the moment that carries you closer to the life you want, one intentional block of time at a time. When we talk about the power of 1 hour a day, it's easy to keep it abstract. But the truth comes alive in stories, real moments where ordinary people used a single hour to create extraordinary change. These stories remind us that transformation doesn't belong only to the privileged or the gifted. It belongs to anyone willing to commit. Take the story of a woman who always dreamed of writing a book. For years, she told herself she didn't have time. Between her job, her family, and the endless list of responsibilities, there was no space for writing. But then she decided to dedicate just 1 hour each morning before the world woke up. A year later, she had a finished manuscript in her hands. It wasn't luck. It wasn't sudden inspiration. It was 1 hour repeated. There's also the man who struggled with his health for decades. Diets came and went, gym memberships expired, motivation fizzled. Nothing seemed to stick. Until one day he stopped focusing on losing 50 pounds and instead committed to walking for 1 hour every evening. No matter the weather, no matter the mood, he showed up for that walk. Over time, not only did his health improve, but his confidence, his energy, and his relationships transformed too. Or consider the teenager who felt lost in school, convinced he wasn't smart enough. He decided to spend 1 hour each day watching educational videos and practicing problems outside of class. Slowly, what seemed impossible became manageable. His grades improved, his self-belief grew, and that single hour opened doors to opportunities he once thought were out of reach. These stories share a common thread. The hour itself wasn't grand. It didn't make headlines. But repeated, it rewrote entire identities. The aspiring writer became an author. The struggling man became an example of discipline. The insecure student became a believer in his own potential. Transformation was hidden inside a choice that seemed too small to matter at first glance. What these stories teach us is that the shift doesn't begin with outcomes. It begins with consistency. It's not about one perfect hour. It's about one imperfect hour, repeated over and over until it reshapes who you are. The transformation is rarely visible day to day, but it compounds until one day the person looking back at you in the mirror is unrecognizable from who you once were. And it's important to notice that these people didn't wait for ideal conditions. They didn't wait for the perfect time, perfect resources, or perfect motivation. They started with what they had. They took 1 hour from the same 24 we all get, and they turned it into a seed for change. Stories of transformation remind us that 1 hour isn't just about time, it's about proof. Proof that change is possible, proof that ordinary people can do extraordinary things, proof that the gap between where you are and where you want to be is smaller than it seems if you're willing to take it 1 hour at a time. We often chase results. We say we want to lose 20 pounds, write a book, earn more money, or run a marathon. But the danger in focusing only on outcomes is that they live in the future. They are always someday. And when results don't come quickly, frustration follows. That's why 1 hour a day is not just about achieving outcomes, it's about shaping identity. When you dedicate 1 hour to something consistently, you begin to change the way you see yourself. Writing every day doesn't just produce pages. It makes you a writer. Exercising daily doesn't just burn calories. It makes you someone who takes care of their body. Studying each evening doesn't just improve grades. It transforms you into a lifelong learner. Identity sticks long after the first result fades. The reason identity matters more than outcomes is because outcomes can be lost. You can hit your weight goal and gain it back. You can finish a project and feel empty afterward. You can achieve success but still feel unfulfilled. But when you anchor yourself in identity, the behavior becomes part of who you are, not just something you did once. Think about the difference between someone who says, I want to run a marathon, and someone who says, I am a runner. The first person is outcome focused. They'll train until race day, but after crossing the finish line, they may never run again. The second person is identity focused. They run because that's who they are, and the marathon is just a milestone along the way. 1 hour a day reinforces this identity shift. Every time you show up, you cast a vote for the kind of person you want to become. 1 hour is less about the finish line and more about the evidence you're building for yourself. This is me. This is what I do. Over time, the weight of those votes outweighs doubt and hesitation. This is why people who focus on identity are more resilient than those who focus only on outcomes. If the scale doesn't move, the outcome-driven person feels like a failure. But the identity-driven person says, I'm someone who shows up for my health and keeps going. Identity keeps you moving when outcomes stall. The irony is that when you focus on identity first, outcomes eventually follow. The person who identifies as a reader will naturally finish more books. The person who identifies as disciplined will naturally reach more goals. But their sense of self isn't dependent on the result. It's grounded in the process. 1 hour a day may not guarantee an outcome on your timeline, but it guarantees something deeper, the reshaping of who you are becoming. And once your identity shifts, the results are no longer something you chase. They become the natural byproduct of who you already are. When you dedicate 1 hour a day to yourself, it might feel like a private act, something personal, something small, something invisible to others. But the truth is, no hour exists in isolation. Every decision you make for yourself sends out ripples that touch the people and the world around you in ways you often can't predict. Take the simple act of exercising for 1 hour each day. On the surface, it looks like a private choice for health. But the ripple is bigger. You gain more energy, which makes you more present with your family. You carry more confidence into your work. You influence friends who notice your consistency. 1 hour doesn't just change your body. It alters the quality of the spaces you step into. The same happens when you dedicate an hour to learning. You might think it only benefits you, but every insight you gain spills over into conversations, decisions, and the value you create for others. A manager who reads about leadership for 1 hour a day eventually leads a team with more clarity. A parent who learns for 1 hour a day becomes a role model for a child who learns to love growth. Even rest can create ripples. Taking 1 hour to slow down, to breathe, to center yourself changes the tone you bring into interactions. Instead of snapping under stress, you carry calmness. Instead of reacting, you respond. That 1 hour of stillness extends into dozens of micro moments throughout the day where you affect others without them even realizing it. The ripple effect is powerful because it multiplies your impact. You may think it's just 1 hour for me, but in truth, it becomes many hours of better outcomes for others. The teacher who studies for an hour creates a better classroom experience. The artist who practices for an hour creates work that inspires countless people. The entrepreneur who plans for an hour creates jobs that change families' lives. And here's the deeper truth: people are watching you, whether you know it or not. A child notices the consistency of a parent. A colleague notices the discipline of a teammate. A friend notices the choices you make day after day. Your 1 hour silently gives permission to others to believe they can do the same. Your ripple becomes their wave. Over time, those ripples begin to form currents. A single choice builds a culture in your home, your workplace, your community. What starts as 1 hour alone turns into a collective shift because others adopt the same mindset. And when groups of people prioritize growth, health, creativity, and presence for just 1 hour a day, entire environments begin to change. That is the hidden multiplier of 1 hour. It doesn't stop with you. It travels outward, sometimes subtly, sometimes boldly, reshaping the spaces you touch. The choice you thought was personal was never just yours. It was always bigger, always wider, always reaching further than you could imagine. When it comes to dedicating 1 hour a day, the most common phrase we hear is, "I don't have time." It's the universal excuse, and it feels true because our days are full. Work, family, obligations, endless demands. It's easy to believe that time is something we simply don't control. But the truth is, time isn't lacking, it's choices that are. Every person on this planet gets the same 24 hours. The difference isn't the amount of time, it's the way it's used. Some people spend an hour on social media, while others spend an hour building a skill. Some spend an hour on distractions, while others spend an hour shaping their future. The empowering truth is that everyone has 1 hour, they just assign it differently. Excuses are comfortable. They protect us from discomfort, from effort, from the risk of failure. But they also trap us. When we tell ourselves we don't have time, what we're really saying is, this isn't a priority for me. And once you frame it that way, the weight of the excuse becomes clear. The barrier isn't the clock. It's the story we tell ourselves about the clock. Empowerment begins the moment you take ownership of that story. Instead of saying, "I don't have time," you ask, "What am I choosing instead?" That question reveals trade-offs. It shows you that time isn't lost, it's invested. And once you see time as an investment, you begin to place it where it matters most. Consider the parent who says, "I don't have time to exercise." Yet they spend an hour watching television each night. When that parent reframes their excuse into a choice, they see the opportunity clearly. It's not a lack of time, it's a decision of where the time flows. And when they redirect that hour into movement, they don't just gain health, they model empowerment for their children. The shift from excuse to empowerment doesn't happen with dramatic gestures, it happens with awareness. Each time you notice an excuse rising up, you ask yourself what it's protecting you from, and then you replace it with action. 1 hour doesn't need permission, it only needs intention. And here's the paradox: once you stop leaning on excuses, you realize how much power you actually have. Instead of feeling at the mercy of your schedule, you begin to shape it. Instead of saying, I can't, you start asking, how can I? That simple reframe turns limitation into possibility. Excuses shrink us, empowerment expands us. And every time you choose to dedicate 1 hour to yourself, you're proving to yourself that you're not defined by limitations. You're defined by the choices you make in spite of them. 1 hour a day sounds simple, almost too simple. And that simplicity is exactly why most people ignore it. We tell ourselves that if change doesn't feel massive, it can't be meaningful. But the call to action here isn't about waiting for the perfect time, the big break, or the life-altering event. It's about starting now with just 1 hour. Think about what happens when you decide today to claim 1 hour as your own. Not tomorrow, not next week, not when life slows down, today. The decision itself creates momentum. You no longer live in someday, you step into now. And that shift is the difference between dreaming and doing. This call to action isn't about perfection. You don't need the perfect plan, the perfect environment, or the perfect routine. What matters is the decision to begin. Even if your hour is messy, even if it feels unproductive at first, the act of showing up is what builds the foundation for change. 1 hour a day can look different for everyone. For one person, it's writing. For another, it's learning. For someone else, it's moving their body, meditating, building, or practicing. The activity doesn't matter as much as the commitment. The action you take is less about what you achieve in the hour and more about who you become because of it. The call to action is also about consistency. 1 hour once won't change your life, but 1 hour every day compounds into transformation. The small act repeated becomes the big shift. That's the hidden truth behind this idea.